Hey there guys, it's Michael, also known as Jackrabbit, coming at you with a new lore video. This lore video is going to be on Warhammer 40k. I love Warhammer 40k. It is such a amazing amalgamation of gothic, high fantasy, and sci-fi into something that actually works. And it's a fantastic space opera. I love the stories, I love the lore, I love the background, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. Just a quick expectations setting here at the beginning of this video. If you're looking for an in-depth analysis of each of the Space Marine legions and what they're about and who their heroes are and what their symbols represent and all that stuff, you're not going to get it here. This video is meant to be a broad overview. This is meant to open the door and guide you in without overwhelming you as to what's the deal with Warhammer 40k. Right? This video will make you conversational in Warhammer 40k and ready to confidently enter into any media, story, literature, etc. that takes place in this setting, and to be able to enjoy it, I think. That's the goal of the video anyway. So, without further ado, let's get into it. A preface I want to give to Warhammer 40k. One of the criticisms I've heard of this medium for some folks when they're trying to get into it before is the random silliness. An example is there's a planet called Metallica with a Space Marine Legion there that wants to create the loudest sounds, and they have like mohawks and guitars that shoot lasers, and people are like, this is so silly as compared to, you know, some of the stuff I'm reading in the Horus Heresy books, which are really heavy and dense and trauma-ridden. So, like, why the silliness? Well, because this used to be a fun, silly space tabletop, space fantasy tabletop, where you got space elves and space dwarves and space orcs and space humans all fighting in space. And it's fun, but there was more to it. There was little bits more to it. The creators had little nuggets here and there. They had a basic timeline. They had some stuff to begin with that people took and expanded upon and developed and wrote stories for and asked questions that the creators had to think about and then develop more. This is an evolving world. And I like to compare it to the 1970s Hobbit versus Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. The earlier stuff, it's a bit more lighthearted at times. It's a bit more whimsical, if you will. But it's still the same world. It's still the same story elements, world building. We've just, with more time and with the evolution of society and things like that, we've developed it into something heavier, something deeper, something stronger. Essentially, I like to view it as these stories have grown up with us, right? And that's what you run into in 40k sometimes. So if you go out on your own and decide to do some deep diving into Warhammer 40k after watching this video and you find things that are really silly, that's okay. Recognize where it's coming from. And if you like it, then if you like the silly things, then enjoy them. If you don't like the silly things, then just turn the page and move on to the next grim, dark, trauma-ridden space opera chapter in the Horus Heresy or whatever, right? Because you'll find it. They're both there. It's just really what you're trying to dive into. But the majority of the newer stuff you'll find leans more into the psychological trauma and poignant political and social themes. So, with that, let's carry on. A quick thank you that I want to throw out to the creators of this wonderful franchise. Rick Priestley, Brian Ansell, who passed away in 2023, and Richard Halliwell, who passed away in 2021. These are the guys who created Warhammer. They're the ones who created the board game. They're the ones who've created this world that we all enjoy so much now today and have fun playing in. So big thank you to them, and gratitude for all they've done and their imagination and sharing that with us to build off of. So now we're going to get into the lore itself. I want to start by talking about a couple terms regarding the planes of existence. First, we have the materium. That's the material plane, if you're thinking of like, a D&D type equivalent. This is reality, the reality we all live in, tangible, real life, right? That's the universe that 40K takes place in, is the material plane. Now, what's important to mention about that is 40K does take place in our universe. There is Earth, there is Mars, there are the other planets. There is, though they don't take as big a role, there is Earth history, Earth art, Earth culture. All the things that we have now are there. This is just many, many, many thousands of years in the future, right? So that's something to keep in mind as you go through the story of 40K. The Immaterium, also known as the Warp, is a psychic dimension of emotion, demons, and chaos gods. When you look at the concept of warp technology, you're opening a portal from point A to point B without having to pass through the middle. You just go through the portal, and as you're going through the portal, you're coming out the other side. 40K plays with the idea of, but what's in the portal? What's in between those spaces? And what 40K asserts is between those places in this world-building context is the plane of the Immaterium, the immaterial universe, the warp. This realm of chaos is a realm of pure, raw, emotional, psychic resonance from the subconscious minds of all sentient life forms. That is what makes up this realm. It is a realm of raw, chaotic, creative, potential energy. And because this is a grimdark setting, it's not very nice, right? The beings who live in this realm are demons. They are the end of the universe, the end of days. They are what will destroy everything when all's said and done, right? They are the end makers. And that's important to recognize. And the emotions and feelings and thoughts, conscious or subconscious or unconscious, are what dictate the quote-unquote reality of this realm. Next, we have the Webway. The Webway is a warp tunnel system designed to protect the travelers of it from being influenced, touched, or hurt by the beings of the Immaterium or warp. We'll talk about who built it and more details of that later, but the Webway is an important thing. Next, you have the Demon Realms. This is a bit of a light touch because you don't run into it too much. It's mentioned from time to time, but as far as I've explored, there's not a lot that just takes place exclusively there, unless we're talking about Total War 3 Warhammer. But that's Warhammer Fantasy, that's not 40K, which we'll talk about distinctions of in a different video. So, but suffice it to say, within the warp, the Chaos Gods have their own realms. So, that's all. Let's move on to the next one. The magic system. Now, in 40K, they don't have magic, per se. It's all psychic powers, utilized by what are called psychers, who are individuals who are able to tap into these powers. These powers come from a connection to the Immaterium or warp. So if you are in the 40K universe and you're chucking fireballs or shooting lasers out your eyes, those powers are coming from a connection that you have made with the warp or the Immaterium. It's the same thing. Therefore, that's where the magic comes from, right? But we talked a little while ago about how the Immaterium is dangerous. It's bad. It's full of demons, the end bringers, right? The end of everything. They live there. And they hate us. They hate everything of the material plane and want to destroy it and tear it down and corrupt it. So, if you're tapped into that and pulling your power from that, that's fundamentally dangerous. And it's dangerous for a couple reasons. Number one, You can become corrupted by it if you lose control of yourself and explode, literally, become a demon, become a portal to let demons in. Or D, all the above, right? Like, it's bad news. So people who are psychic are heavily policed in this setting. It's not a quote-unquote mage-friendly setting. If you are a magic user, you are oppressed. But there's pretty good reason behind that. So, with that, we are prepared to enter into the story. Oh, not quite. We have next the gods. The gods are all bad in 40k. That's important to make that distinction. These gods are not benevolent in any way, shape, or form. They are bad. Anyone who says they are benevolent is a cultist of these gods. So let's go over who they are. There are 4 of them. First, you have Tzeentch. Tzeentch is the god of change, magic, fate, ambition, scheming, and transformation. Tzeentch is your forbidden eldritch knowledge god. He is the one who wants to tell you things you really shouldn't know. Things that'll make your head explode, literally. Things that will corrupt your body and mind because of the knowledge of them. He has plots within schemes within plots, with the result of who the heck knows. He's baffling and bamboozling and confusing on so many different levels. He's all about twisted, corrupted magic and knowledge and forbidden things and secrets. That's Tzeentch. Next, we have Nurgle. Nurgle is the god of decay, disease, entropy, endurance, despair, and a cycle of rot and rebirth. Nurgle is sometimes referred to as the grandfather by his cultists, and the diseases that he concocts and gives are gifts. Those who follow Nurgle, and Nurgle himself, dream of filling the galaxy with rot, disease, decay, all that. Nurgle is always looking to create new diseases. His realm in the warp, in the Immaterium, is called the Garden of Nurgle. And it is quite literally a garden where he cultivates and grows diseases and sicknesses and illnesses. His followers are disease-ridden, plague-ridden, pus, boil, bile, grossness. Very zombie-like, quite frankly, often. So, that's Nurgle. Next, we have Slaanesh. Slaanesh is the god of excess, pleasure, obsession, perfection, indulgence, and desire. This is the god of over-sensory input. Slaanesh wants you to experience everything to the highest degree, all at once, constantly, forever, ever increasing unto infinity. That's bad. That makes you go crazy. That makes you go manic. That makes you go sadomasochistic. It's not good. We'll talk more about Slaanesh and its nonsense as we talk more about the Eldar later, or the Space Elves. We'll get into that. Next, we have Khorne. Khorne is the god of war, bloodshed, rage, martial honor, and violent conflict. Khorne is the Ares of this setting. He likes war. He likes violence. He likes blood. He likes skulls. If you've ever heard the terms in games or online or whatever, blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne, this is directly from Warhammer 40k. This is directly about Khorne. Those are his followers' mottos and battle cries. And that's what he's all about. So these are the Chaos Gods. None of them are nice. None of them are good. All they want is to destroy the material universe and bring about its end. So keeping that in mind, we'll move forward. So let's talk about the creation, the beginning of this universe. In ancient times, there was one original big deal alien species. They were called the Old Ones. If you look at this picture I have here, the one on the right is an Old One. They're kind of like frogs, is how they've been described. They're frog-like aliens. Now, the old ones were super advanced. Physics was a mere suggestion to these guys. They were going around terraforming planets, seeding worlds with sentient life that they could watch and study as it evolved. They were building stars. They were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, right? They were essentially playing with the universe like gods, right? Well, way back when, one of the next races that started to get big and do stuff was a group called the Necron-Tyr. The Necron-Tyr had a bit of an Egyptian aesthetic going on, and they were conquerors. They wanted to rule the universe, and they thought that they, kind of had a right to because of their art and their culture and their knowledge and their tech. But they had the unfortunate problem of their planet being a little too close to their sun and the radiation of their sun causing a genetic disease in all of them, and it was killing them off as a species. They went to the Old Ones asking for help. The Old Ones, for whatever reason, denied them that help. Perhaps they saw the potential the Necron had for evil or for conquering, and they didn't want to allow that. But regardless of their reasons, they chose not to help them. The Necron took this personally. They were not happy. They went and sought other means, and they found them in the form of the star gods known as the Satan. The Satan made a deal with them, said, we'll help you supersede, overcome this disease of your people, overcome extinction. In return, you will destroy the Old Ones. The Necron said, we kind of wanted to do that anyway after they denied us. Let's do it. The Satan then taught the Necron how to transfer their essence into mechanical bodies, thus granting them free from the illnesses and disease that were killing them, and also effectively granting them immortality. This picture on the other side of the old one, the skeletal robot with the gun, that is what the Necron-Tyr became. They became known as the Necron. One of my personal favorites in this setting. The Necron then went to war with the Old Ones and did win. They defeated them. The Old Ones, though, to be fair, were also dealing with the forces of chaos, who they were aware of and trying to make sure and make plans to keep at bay. But we'll get more into that in some later videos. Anyway, the Necron, after defeating the Old Ones, were told by the Satan, the star gods, that they were now going to be the slave race of the Satan, and that the transference into these mechanical shells was something of a trick, because it for the most part, destroyed the Necron-Tyr's souls in the process. The Necron also took this personally and went to war with the Satan and defeated them, and then used their bodies to power superweapons. Around this time, there were two other races that were starting to come up on the rise. The Eldar, space elves, and the Orcs. Now, the Necron looked at this after having fought two wars with nigh unto gods and said, we don't have the energy to deal with this right now. But we are immortal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to sleep and wait this out. And eventually these fleshy races will die off, and we'll come back and rule a nice clean galaxy free of these pathetic flesh creatures. So that was what they did. They went to sleep. They went in their tombs and went to sleep. The Eldar went on to become the rulers of the universe. Their technology advanced massively. They created their own webway through the warp and were virtually unchallenged. The Orcs were an ever-present annoyance that the Eldar were fighting and did push the Eldar to increase their technology. But the Orcs ingenuity was very low, and we'll talk more about that later, its particulars. Orcs are always going to be there, and they're always going to be a threat, and they're always going to be powerful and dangerous. But they're not really going to evolve past a certain point. They'll evolve with you high enough to be a threat to you, but they're never really going to go further beyond that. It's out of their nature to be rulers of the universe. They would get bored and start fighting among themselves, which they frequently do anyway. So we'll talk more about that later, but suffice it to say that the orcs were just a constant annoyance for the Eldar, and the Eldar just kept progressing and progressing and progressing. Now the Eldar got to the point where they were so advanced and so unchallenged that their society began to decay. And it began to decay in terms of indulgence and greed and lust and just sensory pleasures, right? And they became so greedy and lustful and obsessed with sensory pleasures that they created a psychic spike in the warp. A psychic spike of this raw craving for more pleasure, right? And that spike was so powerful that it erupted and created a new god in the form of Slaanesh. And the creation of a new chaos god was not a minor event. It was cataclysmic. It ripped a hole in the warp. It destroyed the webway that the Eldar had worked so hard to build. And it destroyed the Eldar civilization. Very few Eldar survived. Most of them had their body and souls devoured by their new god Slaanesh. And even now, if an Eldar dies, their soul goes straight to Slaanesh to be devoured, unless they have certain things in place to prevent that. And because of their actions, there is a hole in space where the immaterium leaks into the materium. So what the Eldar created through their lust and greed and desire for sensory pleasures was cataclysmic for both themselves and the universe as a whole. This was when humanity stepped in. So to understand the story of humanity, you need to know about the Immortal Emperor. The Immortal Emperor is a man who is a type of being called a perpetual. They are beings that live forever and are powerful psychics, or at least we think they live forever, as far as we've been able to account so far. The Immortal Emperor has been a figure in mankind's evolution since as far back as we're aware. He has been behind the scenes shaping humanity's progress as time goes on. There are hints in the lore that point that he may have been some of the historical religious or political or military leaders throughout history, to take a more active role at times. But the only one that they actually, if I remember correctly, straight up say is Alexander the Great. But it is hinted that he has been other characters from human history, right? Now, humanity continued to progress from our day and age into the future with amazing strides in science and technology. We went out to the stars, we populated the universe, we were all over the place, things were going great. Until they weren't. One of the big areas that humanity really advanced in was AI and robotics. Well, eventually the robots decided they didn't want to serve mankind anymore, and they rebelled. And that was a cataclysmic war for humanity. Humanity did win, but at great cost. Resources were thin, things were bad, humanity had lost a lot of knowledge, a lot of power, a lot of lives in that war, a lot of connection, fighting the men of iron, the robots. Then another war erupted, a civil war between Earth and Mars. This further alienated things and eventually led to the total dissolution of human society as we know it. Humanity was back into tribes, barely subsisting. Cults were arising, religious cults, and fear was the dominant emotion among humankind. The people of Mars turned to worshiping the machines they no longer knew how to operate, in hopes that the machines would answer their prayers. And the men on Earth just struggled to survive. The Immortal Emperor saw this and decided that he had to take over fully and completely now. And so he did. He stepped in and began what was called the Unification Wars. He went across all of the Earth, uniting all of humanity under his banner, conquering all the tribes, getting everybody back together. He went to Mars and got the people of Mars to follow him by activating a great machine that they had been praying to and not been able to get to do anything. Upon doing this, they declared him the Omnissiah, the human embodiment of the great machine spirit that they worshipped. Now, with Earth and Mars under his control, the Emperor set out to go out through the universe and find all the lost bastions of humanity throughout the universe and unite them under him. All of humanity united once again, but under one banner. He very much promoted science and secularism and pushed those agendas very strongly. And he decided that in order to go on this crusade across the universe and to get his people all united together once again, he would need an army. He knew he would need that army, not just because of alien threats, but also because of humanity who had strayed too far from their roots. And he was also acutely aware of the dangers of the warp and of chaos, and wanted to prepare humanity to fight against that inevitable doom, and to be able to win as well, and stand as conquerors of the universe forevermore. Well, with that, he needed science and technology and magical ability, psychic ability that he did not possess. He was a powerful psychic, but what he needed in order to accomplish this superb, perfect army was beyond him. So he set out to the warp. He set out to meet the Chaos Gods and to strike a deal. The particulars of what deal was struck, we don't know. What we do know is that in exchange for some sort of assurance on his part, the Chaos Gods granted him the ability to create demigods from him, sons, and to make himself something of a god in and of himself. Now, he continued to promote secularism and did not promote himself as a god at this time, nor did he promote his sons as demigods. But the idea was that he would create a number of sons, and each of those sons would use their DNA spliced into soldiers who were trained by them to create legions. And each of those sons would lead those legions by his command across the universe to unite all of humanity under one glorious banner. Each of these sons were created from their own father's genetic material. That genetic material which had been blessed by the warp, by the gods of the warp in some way or another. Now, at some points, the Chaos Gods began to fear or realize that whatever the God Emperor of mankind had promised them, he was not going to deliver on. and that his entire goal was their destruction. Upon realizing this, they sought to thwart his plans. They scattered his young infant sons across the universe and on abandoned human colonies and worlds across the vastness of space. Over time, the Emperor sought out to retrieve his sons, and retrieve them he did. The first of which, and who will prove to be most important in this story, was Horus. Horus led the forces of mankind after the Emperor retired from the battlefield of scouring the universe for the remainder of humanity's outposts. The reason the Emperor did this was because he sought to build his own webway and was trying to work out the particulars of that. But he did not tell his children this. He also, though this is questioned, but it's leaned pretty hard in the direction that yes, he was doing this. He was also preparing to launch humankind on a new direction of religious fervor over secularism. And this religious fervor would be to him and none else. To a god emperor of mankind. Now, once again, the forces of chaos became aware of the emperor's designs, and were seeing his great success in regathering his sons and accomplishing his goals. And with that, they tempted Horus. They tempted other leaders of the Space Marine legions, the Super Soldier legions, and were able to, long and short, convince them of the Emperor's betrayal of them in varying degrees and in varying ways, and set them upon him. Now, not all of the sons turned. Half of them, in fact, stood loyal to the Emperor. But Horus and his half waged a bloody civil war on mankind and on the other legions that shook the foundations of the universe. This bloody civil war ultimately ended with the near death of the immortal god emperor of mankind. Horus confronted him and nearly killed him. Very nearly killed him. And very nearly to such a degree where the immortal emperor is all but dead now in the world of Warhammer 40k. He sits upon his throne, a skeletal figure, barely alive, keeping the webway he was working so hard to construct, barely operating, by the living sacrifices of psychics from across the realm sustaining his life force. The immortal emperor is a dead god, but a dead god that lives on in perpetual undeath upon his throne. This is why the skull symbol is such a big motif in Warhammer 40k, because humanity now worships an undead god. Horus and his forces were pushed back into the realm of chaos, where they remain to this day, still trying to tear down the forces of mankind. The remaining Space Marine legions are fragmented, most of them. Their primarchs, the sons of the Emperor, are dead. And the only ones who still live for the most part are those that are allied with Horus. There are a few that are still alive, and there are a few that are presumed may be alive but are lost. But it is not looking good. Thus, the grim dark nature of Warhammer 40k. So, just a brief kind of timeline of what we just talked about. We have the War in Heaven. That's the ancient cosmic war between the Necron tier and the old ones. The rise and fall of the Eldar, the whole thing of Slaanesh coming into being. The Unification Wars, when the Emperor conquered Terra, also known as Earth. The Great Crusade, that's when humanity went across the galaxy trying to gather up all the remaining human outposts and unify them again under the Emperor. The Horus Heresy, that was when Horus and his group turned on the Emperor. The Imperium Stagnation, Endless Decay, that is where we find ourselves after the Horus Heresy, where things aren't looking good. And they're continuing to just get worse. And then the Indomitus era, galaxy split by warp storms. As I said, the immaterium is leaking into the material universe, and that's just getting worse and worse over time as well. The way things are set up is this is a fight against inevitable doom. Right? Now, does that mean it's not possible for humanity to win? No, it is possible, but it's going to take a miracle. It's going to take a lot of miracles to make that happen. Here is a map of the Warhammer 40k universe. You can see it's enormous, and there are tons of planets and stuff. If you're interested in this, just look it up online, Warhammer 40k map. The actual map is interactive, not obviously in this video, so you can click the planets and the places and learn more about them if that interests you. But just to give you a broad overview, or if you like maps like I do, this is what it looks like. Some important worlds that are mentioned a lot. Holy Terra, that's Earth. Mars, that's where the Adeptus Mechanicus live. We're going to talk more about them. They're the guys who worship machines, and they're pretty much the custodians of all human technology. Under their belief system and the way the universe is currently set up, they believe that creating new technology is heresy, and that all technology that they use should be old technology that they find and learn how to refurbish and use. But only human technology, because alien technology is also heresy. So, important to recognize. The Imperial Palace, it's a big fortress on Terra where the Emperor lives, kind of, sort of. We have the Eye of Terra, massive warp rift where reality and chaos overlap. That is where the hole was. That's the hole. There it is. The Great Rift, a galaxy-spanning warp storm that split the Imperium in half. In the current era, dramatically worsened travel, communication, survival across human space. Like I said, the warp is getting worse. Famous war zones. Cadia. You'll hear a lot about Cadia. It was a planet that kind of had like its own like 300 moment where they stood against impossible odds and lost, but man, did they do so with style. Soldiers from Cadia are considered some of the strongest and most resilient soldiers because there are regular soldiers as well in this world, and we'll talk about that. The Space Marines are just the super soldiers. So, we'll continue with that later. Armageddon, heavy industrial world repeatedly invaded by orcs and chaos forces. It's kind of just an ongoing war between humans and orcs. It lasts forever. Vigilus, strategic world controlling a vital passage between halves of the Imperium, becomes a focal point for massive multi-faction warfare during the era Indomitus. Octaria sector, a region consumed by a massive war between Tyranids and orcs. This is, again, an endless war. Space Marine homeworlds, Macragge, or Macragge, or Macrage, however you want to pronounce it. Capital of Ultramar, home of the Ultramarine chapter. That's the Space Marines that are blue with the Omega symbol on their shoulder. Baal, harsh desert world of the Blood Angels. It reflects the chapter's tragic nobility and struggle against their genetic curse. A lot of the Space Marines have different things with their legion that define them. I'm not going to get into that, but just so you're aware of it. Fenris, death world of the Space Wolves, shaped by brutal seasons and warrior culture. Its environment produces some of the Imperium's fiercest fighters. Space Wolves are kind of like Viking Space Marines. Oh, and the Blood Angels are kind of like vampiric knights. Nocturne, volcanic home of the salamanders, emphasizing endurance and protection of civilians. Its culture reflects sacrifice and craftsmanship. These guys are the like rescue corps. They like are constantly protecting and rescuing regular humans. Their salamanders are cool. Medusa, harsh industrial world of the Iron Hands. It embodies their belief in strength through augmentation survival. It's a big volcano world. Um, and they're really into making weapons and blacksmithing and stuff like that. Xenos worlds. Komora, hidden city of Drukhari within the Webway. A vast nightmare metropolis of cruelty and excess is the center of piracy, torture, and dark intrigue. Bad planet of bad space elves. We'll talk more about them later. Craft worlds. Massive world ships carrying remnants of the Aldari civilization. They preserve ancient culture while fighting to prevent extinction. Really, really big spaceships for nice space elves trying to survive. Tau Empire worlds, or such as Tau Prime, core planets of the rapidly expanding Tau civilization. They represent a rising alternative power in the galaxy. The Tau are a alien race that has built a confederacy of allied alien races. They are a rising power. They're a young race. They have a caste system. We'll talk more about them. Necron domains, Solomons, Trays in the Infinites museum world filled with artifacts and captive specimens that highlights Necron's ancient history and obsession with preservation. Notorious Death Worlds, Katachan, jungle world where nearly every organism is lethal. It produces some of the toughest soldiers in the Imperial Guard. Strategic regions, Ultramar, a realm of well-governed systems ruled by the Ultramarines, demonstrates what a functioning human empire could look like amid chaos. Segmentum Solar, the region of space surrounding Terra, that's our solar system. Nakamund Gauntlet, a narrow corridor through the Great Rift, allowing limited travel between halves of the Imperium. If you can even remember like 5 of these, you'll be well in advance of knowing what's going on if people are talking about maps. These are the ones that are mentioned most often. Everything else that's mentioned is usually a one-off, so don't worry too much about it. So, now we're going to talk about the races. This is where I think a really big part of world building comes into play, and I just wanted to make sure that we really give credence to this, because this is where people think about the most, I think, when they're getting into 40K. Humanity. Here's a bunch of races associated with, well, not races, but groups associated with humanity. The first of which is the Adeptus Astartes. Space Marines are genetically engineered transhumans created through extensive surgical implementation of gene seed organs. So that's organs that are cloned from pieces of the sons of the Emperor. There you go. That grant superhuman strength, resilience, enhanced senses, rapid healing, extended lifespans. They're also really tall. Just by the by. These guys are all like 7-8 feet tall. Their bodies can survive extreme environments, resist toxins, and even enter suspended animation, while their minds are conditioned for absolute discipline and war. They are no longer truly human, but living weapons forged from humanity's genetic potential. Next, you have the Adeptus Sororitas, affectionately referred to by the player base as battle nuns. While biologically human, sisters of battle, or the Adeptus Sororitas, are set apart by extreme physical training, mental conditioning, and an almost supernatural strength of faith that can manifest as miraculous acts such as divine protection or impossible endurance. Their unwavering devotion allows them to resist corruption and psychic influence to an extraordinary degree. What makes them different is not biology, but spiritual conviction elevated to a weapon. They are really, really into the Immortal Emperor. That is their whole thing. Most religious people of humanity. The Adeptus Mechanicus. Members of the Mechanicus deliberately replace their flesh with cybernetic augmentations, often becoming more machine than human over time, enhancing cognition, durability, and specialized function. Many possess mechadendrites, implanted processors, or synthetic organs that allow them to interface directly with machines and data. Their identity shifts from individual humanity towards becoming a vessel of the machine god's logic. Very Borg adjacent, if you're talking Star Trek. The Adeptus Custodes. The Custodes are individually handcrafted by arcane genetic alchemy far beyond the processes used for Space Marines, making each of them vastly superior in strength, speed, intellect, and perception. They possess near-perfect memory, extraordinary reflexes, and centuries, sometimes millennia, of accumulated experience. Each custodian is closer to a demigod than a soldier. These guys are specifically at the royal palace. Their job is to protect the emperor. That is what they do. And then you have the Astra Militarum. The Astra Militarum is the vast backbone of the Imperium's military, composed of countless regiments of ordinary humans drawn from millions of worlds. They fight impossible wars through discipline, numbers, and sheer determination, holding the line against horrors that would break lesser civilizations. Their sacrifices sustain the Imperium's survival on a galactic scale. So these are the main groups among humanity. If you're playing the tabletop, you can play as any of them. They're quite diverse in that regard, but you can see that humanity exists under a death god cult, theocratic dictatorship. It is a rough time. And really, in some ways, which is the scary part, some of that's justified. And that's one of the interesting things you run into in Warhammer is you look at the way they're handling things and you're like, man, this is brutal. I don't really see a great alternative, though. And it's one of the things I find really interesting. Next, we have the forces of chaos. So this is a mixture of demons and chaos space marines. The forces of chaos in Warhammer 40k are the servants and manifestations of the warp's dark powers. A vast and corrupting coalition of traitor space marines, demonic legions, warped warlords, and countless cultists who have turned from the Imperium to seek power, freedom, or transcendence under the patronage of the Chaos Gods, Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. United not by loyalty, but by ambition and the ruinous influence of the warp, they waged an endless war to overthrow order, spread corruption, and reshape reality according to their gods' desires, embodying humanity's darkest impulses amplified to cosmic scale and constantly threatening to drag the galaxy into madness and eternal conflict. That's their goal. That's what they're trying to do. And it's looking like they're going to succeed unless something changes. So, fun facts. All right, let's talk about the Eldar. So, as we discussed, after everything went to crap, the Eldar went in a couple different directions. First, you got the Craftworld Eldar. The Craftworld Eldar are disciplined survivors of their civilization's fall who live aboard vast world ships traveling the galaxy, following the strict paths to control their emotions and avoid the excesses that burst Slaanesh. They are highly psychic, technologically advanced, and fight to preserve their dwindling species while guiding fate through foresight. Each craftworld maintains its own culture, traditions, and long-term plans for survival. Another thing that they do that's worth mentioning is they have these crystals. And when they die, their soul goes into the crystal. It's technology that they've developed. And then the crystal goes into a matrix, which is connected to the whole craftworld ship. So they get to stay with their people in kind of a virtual heaven that they've developed to prevent them from being eaten by Slaanesh. One of the worst, most awful things you can do to an Eldar is kill them and then crush their crystal, because that's just more than murder as far as they're concerned. Next, you have the Drukhari. The Drukhari dwell in the hidden city of Komorrah, within the Webway, sustaining themselves by feeding on the suffering of others to stave off the soul drain of Slaanesh. They are cruel raiders, masters of torture and intrigue, living in a society defined by ambition, fear, and predation. Unlike their cousins, they rejected discipline in favor of embracing their darker nature. So these guys, they took the indulgent, sadomasochistic nastiness of Slaanesh and said, what if we do it to the maximum? Then will Slaanesh leave us alone? And Slaanesh is like, yeah, unless you die, then I'll still eat you. But I won't actively try to hunt you down if you're doing that. And they're like, cool. So that's what they do. And they're really messed up. They're like, I'm going to make a chandelier out of 3 people that I'm going to keep alive, and their screams will be our ambiance for our dinner party. Like, that's legit how they are. Next, we have the Exodites. The Exodites are Eldar who fled decadence long before the fall, settling on distant maiden worlds where they live in harmony with nature and ride or bond with megafauna-like dragon creatures. Their societies are simpler and more spiritual, valuing balance and self-restraint as protection against corruption. They serve as quiet guardians of their world and ancient traditions. So these guys are kind of more like, since we're talking space elves, the craft world are like high elves, Drukhari are like dark elves, Exodites are like wood elves, right? Then we have the last group. These are the Harlequin. The Harlequins are mysterious warrior performers devoted to the laughing god Segorak, acting as guardians of Aldari lore and agents who move freely among all factions. They fight with dazzling speed and theatrical precision, reenacting mythic stories that preserve the memory of their people's past and warn of future dangers. Their motives are often cryptic, serving long cosmic designs. They're questionable in whether they're good or bad. Sometimes it feels like they're just kind of awaiting the end of the world and dancing their way into it, not promoting it or pushing it. They just kind of have accepted it. So they're an interesting subgroup that's worth noting. It does mention that they have a god. The Aldari have a pantheon that they believe in, but as far as I can tell, it's not really a thing. As far as I'm able to see, it's more just their belief system, but it's not really reinforced by anything tangible outside of what their technology is able to produce. So, next, we have the Orcs. Now let's talk about Orcs. The Orcs of Warhammer 40k are a brutal, exuberant species of fungal-based warriors. That's right, you heard it right. These guys are mushrooms. They do not reproduce. They are created via spores that grow and develop into orcs, who exist for the sheer joy of fighting, spreading across the galaxy through resilient spores released by their bodies that can grow into new orcs, squigs, that's their monsters and mounts, and entire ecosystems wherever they take hold. Their collective psychic field, often called the Wa, subtly reshapes reality through their beliefs, allowing ramshackle weapons and vehicles to function simply because enough orcs are convinced they should, making red vehicles go faster and improbable technology roar to life. Orcs freely augment themselves with crude cybernetics and battlefield graphs, often performed by pain boys, orc doctors, replacing limbs with mechanical weapons or reinforcing their already formidable bodies, embodying a unique blend of biological resilience, anarchic engineering, and reality-bending enthusiasm that makes them one of the galaxy's most unpredictable and unstoppable forces. Orcs are most dangerous when they're united. Most of the time they're fighting each other, so they're not a problem, but when one orc is able to convince enough other orcs to follow them to fight humies or space elves or whatever, then they're a big problem. And they're one that has to be stopped. But they're more a force of nature almost than a truly sentient threat. The Necron, my boys. I love these guys. The Necrons are an ancient race of undying mechanical beings who were once the mortal Necrontyr, a short-lived and bitter species that, in their desperation for immortality and revenge against the godlike Old Ones, entered into a pact with the star-devouring entities known as the Satan, undergoing the process of biotransference that transferred their minds into living metal bodies at the cost of their souls. After helping the Satan wage a catastrophic war in heaven, the Necrons eventually turned on their former masters, shattering and enslaving the Satan as tools before retreating into millions of years of stasis to await a galaxy ripe for conquest. Now awakening across multiple tomb worlds, they seek to restore their dynastic empires, reclaim dominion over reality, and impose cold eternal order upon a universe they believe was always theirs by right. Part of why they've started waking up is because, as I mentioned, humanity only believes now in finding old technology and restoring it. And in their efforts to find old technology, they woke up some of the first tomb worlds of the Necron and brought the Necron back. So that's a big problem and a bad on the humans' end. The Tau. The Tau Empire is a young, rapidly expanding interstellar civilization driven by the philosophy of the greater good, Tau Va, a collectivist ideology that emphasizes unity, cooperation, and the subordination of individual ambition to the prosperity of the whole, organized into a rigid caste system consisting of the fire caste, warriors, earth caste, engineers and laborers, air caste, pilots and voidfarers, water caste, diplomats and administrators, and the mysterious ruling ethereals, whose authority maintains social cohesion and whose influence may extend to subtle biological or psychological control. Unlike most powers in the galaxy, the Tau actively incorporate allied species into their empire, including the highly adaptable humans, Gwevesa, who defect or are integrated into the Tau worlds. The avian mercenaries known as the Kroot, who evolve by consuming the traits of their prey, the technology adept Vespid with their crystalline communication helms, as well as other client species like the Nikasar and the Demiurge, forming a multi-species coalition bound by shared purpose rather than domination. While their strategic goals focus on expanding their sphere through diplomacy, technological superiority, and precise military action, seeking to build a rational and ordered alternative to the brutality of the wider galaxy. Though critics within the setting question whether the greater good represents a genuine altruism or a subtle form of cultural assimilation enforced by the ethereal's guiding hand. So at the moment they seem kind of like good guys, but everyone's really skeptical about it. So we'll see what happens. Next you have the Tyranid. The Tyranid are an extragalactic, hive-minded species of bioengineered organisms driven by an insatiable imperative to consume all biomass, operating as extensions of the vast and incomprehensible hive mind that coordinates entire fleets across the void with cold, predatory intelligence. They invade worlds through massive hive fleets that strip planets bare, adapting rapidly through genetic evolution and spawning specialized creatures for every battlefield role, from towering monsters to microscopic infiltrators like gene stealers that seed cults to weaken civilizations from within. Their ultimate goal appears to be the total consumption of all life to fuel further expansion, representing a cosmic ecological force rather than a conventional enemy, a living tide that devours ecosystems, civilizations, and even the genetic legacy of its prey to become even more efficient. And finally, last but not least, the Leagues of Votan. The Leagues of Votan are a pragmatic and technology-advanced civilization of clone kin, often called the Kin, who trace their origins to ancient human mining and colonization fleets that ventured into the galactic core during humanity's distant past. Guided and governed by powerful ancestor core superintelligences known as Votan, which store the memories, knowledge, and cultural identity of their people. Organized into semi-independent leagues bound by oaths of kinship, contract, and resource stewardship, they operate vast industrial operations and stellar mining enterprises while fielding heavily armored forces equipped with sophisticated gravitic and plasma technologies. Valuing practicality, reliability, and honor in all dealings, their long isolation fostered a culture of resilience and self-sufficiency, and though they maintained trade and occasional alliances with other powers, they ultimately pursued the preservation of their kin and the steady accumulation of resources under the watchful guidance of their increasingly ancient and enigmatic ancestor cores. These are the space dwarves, except they're clones and distantly related to humans. So, that more or less covers the world or universe of Warhammer 40k. With this, you should be able to kind of step into anywhere in the 40k universe and start having fun and experiencing the world and learning new things. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was fun to make, and have a good one.